In this video, I'm going to talk about two fallacies, and I think both are important. They're really related. One is just the opposite of the other. One I've talked about in several videos, the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. The other one, which I think is its complement, is something that I may have discovered or invented. I'm not sure. I'd like to get your take on that if you've seen it before, heard about it before. And it's tied in with postmodernism, so I'll get to that. But I'm going to put these together, and it's really going to be maybe a new book. And so, let me know if you think this is book worthy. And so let's start off with the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. Super important fallacy because it's so prevalent in our culture. And these fallacies are all about ontology, making a mistake about the ontological status of something. And so ontology is just a philosophy word. It just means how something exists. And so we've got the physical world, and we're not quite sure what it is, but it has a certain consistency to it, regularity, things like gravity seem to work all the time. And then we've got the mental world, and we've got the mind, and we've got abstractions like categories or ideas. And it seems to have a different ontology. And so the mental world, again, there's reductionism and all this, but there just seems to be something different. Humans have picked up on this forever, that a thought doesn't seem to have any physical substance to it. And so this world of abstract ideas seems to have a completely different ontology. So the first fallacy is called the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. And the mistake is to take something that's abstract, something that comes from the thinking mind, and mistakenly believe that it has the ontological status of something concrete, that is to say, part of the physical world. Super popular fallacy. I think it's really important because we do this all the time. In fact, No Self, No Problem was based to a large extent on this fallacy because things like countries, things like work, these have no actual physicality to them. They are constructs of the mind. You might even use the phrase social constructs. And of course, the self is another idea. It exists as a thought. And the mistake, of course, and why this is an error, is that we mistakenly take the idea of a self and mistake it for a concrete physical thing. And that's, of course, why neuroscience has investigated taking apart the brain, trying to find this self. And they can't find it because, of course, it's not a thing. It's not concrete. It is just an idea. And of course, the whole trip of enlightenment is to see that the self has no physicality to it. It exists ontologically as an abstraction. So that's the first error, the error of misplaced concreteness. Now, this kind of hit me all of a sudden about a week or two ago, and I've been working on it ever since, just kind of taking it apart and philosophizing about it. And it's really the complement, and I call it the fallacy of misplaced abstraction. And so what we do is we just go the opposite direction. The fallacy of misplaced abstraction is when we take something that is actually part of the physical world and we mistake it for something that is ontologically like a social construct or an idea, something that has a different ontological status to it. And of course, this is what I would say is the core of postmodernism. And I was discussing this in class a couple weeks ago, and it was very interesting to hit them up with this because postmodernism is very popular, but very few people really get into it philosophically. And if you do get into it, what you see is that there's only one core thing to postmodernism, and that is that the only truth is that there are no truths. So let that sink in and bake in your brain for a little bit. The only truth is that there are no truths. And you could say, well, that's a little paradoxical, but of course, that's why things are very difficult to define in postmodernism, because it totally severs the mind's connection with physical reality. And so imagine we've got these two worlds. We've got the mental, but we have the physical. And in this error, what we're doing is we're severing that lifeline to reality. In other words, the mental world is the only thing that actually exists, and the physical world becomes absolutely discounted. It's no longer real. And you say, well, okay, what's the problem with that? Well, I'll get to it in a second, but let me just give you a great example of how this is really taking over. And if you're watching this channel, I bet, well, I don't know, maybe half or a fourth of you are familiar with the Sokol hoax. And what Sokol did was publish a paper. I forget it was a very fancy title. It sounded very academic and all this, but basically it just suggested that gravity was a social construct. In other words, gravity is just the mind, the thinking mind, and if we don't think about gravity, it doesn't exist. So it took, again, this is a great example of this type of error, because it's taking something that is part of the physical world, gravity, and taking its ontological status over to only that of the mental world, or existing as a mental object or a social construct. And you say, okay, well, what's so bad about that? Well, what's wrong with postmodernism? Why not? Why isn't everything just whimsically invented by the mind? Well, I'm not going to take the philosophy apart philosophically. What I am going to do is just suggest that I've done so many videos on mindfulness and meditation, mindful eating, and what do all these have in common? Tai Chi, yoga, a huge list, box breathing, a huge list of things that we could talk about. Thousands and thousands of studies behind it. What do these all have in common? Well, even, again, just to throw in grounding, and it was very interesting. I was watching Better Call Saul, his brother, who was very, very anxious, and he even did grounding. He was having a panic attack, and he was just naming 5 things he could see, 5 things he could touch, what these all have in common is they stop us from thinking. They get us out of the thinking mind, and they bring us back to reality. Now, I don't know what reality is. I'm not sure anyone knows definitively what the physical world is, but we do seem to have thousands of pieces of data that suggest that if we spend more time in our minds, things become very, very anxious. In fact, I cover that paper quite a bit, though a wandering mind is an unhappy mind, because that paper was able to show that the more you let the mind wander, the more depressed and anxious you became. And of course, all the data on meditation and mindfulness shows that the more we come into this world and we stop thinking about it and we're here now, the more we find peace. And so the whole point of that is that if we deny physical reality, it's almost a sure recipe for greater anxiety and greater depression. If we get out of our thinking mind. I love how Alan Watts said everyone needs to lose their mind and come to their senses. Why come to your senses? Because in the sensory world, we've got minimum thought, and we're here right now. And again, I don't know what this physical reality is, but it seems to be the most reliable gateway to peace.